Welcome to the Sage Solutions Podcast, where we talk about all things personal growth, personal development, and becoming your best self. My name is David Sage, and I am a self-worth and confidence coach with Sage Coaching Solutions. Have you ever found yourself standing in the middle of a grocery store aisle, staring at 15 different types of olive oil, feeling genuinely paralyzed? Or maybe it's not olive oil or some grocery choice. Maybe it's staring at an email that you need to send to your boss or your coworker, agonizing over whether to use a period or an exclamation point. Or maybe, and this is a more heavy one, it's sitting in your car, in your driveway, wondering if you're in the right career, the right relationship, or the right city, and doing absolutely nothing about it. Because the thought of making the wrong choice in all of these situations can be terrifying. If any of that resonates with you, then you're in the right place. I've personally actually been in all three of those situations. Yes, the olive oil one included. But let's get a little deeper. So come do this mental exercise with me. I want you to think about the last time that you felt completely exhausted. I don't mean physical exhaustion from running a marathon or lifting a bunch of weights. I mean that deep, behind your eyes mental fatigue, where your brain feels like it's operating through a thick fog. If you trace that fatigue back to its source, more often than not, you won't find a mountain of physical labor. You'll find a graveyard of unmade decisions. Every single day, we are bombarded with thousands of choices. Some are small choices. What to wear, what to eat, which email to answer first. Others are big ones. Whether to pivot careers, how to handle a strained relationship, or where to invest your hard-earned money. But here is the truth that we rarely talk about. The human brain handles the friction of choice the exact same way, regardless of the scale, whether it's a big choice or a small one. And when we get stuck, we leak our own power. Today, we are dedicating our time to a trait that separates those who merely dream about a deliberate life from those who actually live it. We are talking about decisiveness. But before we get into it, our goal with this podcast is to share free, helpful tools with you and anyone you know who is looking to improve their life. So take action, subscribe, and share this podcast with them. Over the next 30-ish minutes, we are stripping away the myths. We're going to define what decisiveness actually is and what it isn't. We're going to map out the hidden compounding cost of living in a state of chronic indecision and contrast that with the incredible life-altering benefits of cultivating decisiveness as one of your strongest muscles. And later in this episode, we're going to look at the neuroscience of why our brains resist making choices, dive into 2 powerful mental models for making high-quality decisions, and give you a rigorous, step-by-step training framework to transform yourself into a highly decisive individual. That's right. No fluff, no superficial fixes, just deep, actionable psychology. So let's dive in. I think it's probably best if we start by defining our terms. What is decisiveness? Culturally, we have this skewed perception of what a decisive person looks like. We think of a hyperconfident, loud leader or CEO who instantly knows the perfect answer to every complex problem. We think decisiveness means being a fortune teller who always makes the right choice. But that's crap. It's a complete lie. That's not how the real world works. Top-tier decisiveness is not the ability to always make the right choice. Decisiveness is the courage to make a choice, accept the uncertainty, and commit to managing the consequences. It is the understanding that information is always imperfect, the future is always unwritten, and that waiting for 100% certainty is a sophisticated form of cowardice and inaction. True decisiveness is about momentum. It's knowing that you cannot steer a vehicle that is sitting in park. The moment you make a choice, you put the car in drive. This is where the saying, "you can't steer a parked car," comes from. If you make the wrong choice, at least the car is moving and you can steer it in the right direction. And the moment that you make a choice, you are putting that car in drive. Even if you turn down the wrong street, you are now moving, which means you can hit the brakes, turn the wheel, and course correct. Indecision keeps you parked on the side of the highway, watching the world pass you by while your engine idles and your fuel burns. To understand why this trait is so critical, we have to look objectively at the choice track record of our lives. Let's look at the costs first, because humans are naturally loss averse. So we need to understand exactly what indecision is stealing from us. The first major cost of indecision is cognitive drag. Think of your brain like a high-performance computer. Every single unresolved choice in your life is an open application running in the background. You haven't decided whether to sign up for that course, open tab. You haven't decided how to address that boundary issue with your family member, open tab. You're agonizing over a minor business decision, open tab. When you have 50 open tabs, your system slows down, your battery drains faster, your capacity for creativity, presence, and deep joy are all severely compromised because your working memory is constantly burning processing power on things you refuse to resolve. The second cost of indecision is opportunity cost. While you are waiting to feel perfectly ready to choose a direction, the window of opportunity is often actively closing. Markets shift, relationships evolve, timing evaporates. The tragedy of indecision is that it is, in a weird way in itself, a decision. When you choose not to decide, you are actively choosing to let external circumstances, other people, and the world around you make the choice for you. You are surrendering your agency, your sovereignty, and your power. And the final, most subtle yet damaging cost is the erosion of self-trust. Every time you look at a choice, hesitate, procrastinate, and walk away, you send a micro signal to your subconscious mind. That signal says, "I don't trust myself to handle this, to handle the outcome," or "I'm incompetent in the face of uncertainty." Over months and years, this chips away at our self-esteem and starts to build an image and identity around being indecisive. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as this negative compound effect builds over time, you become dependent on validation from others because you've trained yourself to believe that your own judgment isn't good enough, that it's not safe. Pretty scary. When I was preparing for this episode, even I didn't realize quite how many costs there were to indecision. But I'm not here to scare you. So let's look at the more positive side. At the alternative, what happens when you intentionally cultivate decisiveness as a trait? What are the benefits? First, we have time savings. When you're making decisions quickly and efficiently, you are spending way less time making decisions and way more time acting on them. The compounded time savings allows you to do more things in your life, be more efficient, and get things done. And because you're acting quickly, you're also not missing those windows of opportunity when you choose to take them. Second, we have the velocity of learning. If you make 5 decisions in the time it takes someone else to make 1, you get 5 data points of feedback while they are still analyzing the first problem. If 3 of your choices were wrong, you've learned exponentially more through real-world feedback than they have throughout their abstract contemplation and indecision. Decisive people don't succeed because they have a better intuition. They succeed because their loop of execution and adaptation is faster. And as a side effect, they're training their intuition to be better. Third is profound psychological peace. When you become decisive, you close your open tabs. You make the choice, you step into the reality of that choice, and that background anxiety vanishes. You gain a massive injection of presence. You can actually be with your family, focus on your work, or enjoy your rest because your brain isn't trapped in a loop of perpetual calculation. And finally, decisiveness is one of the things that can help build an unshakable foundation of self-trust. When you make a choice, face a suboptimal outcome, and realize that you didn't break, that you were able to pivot, learn, and survive, something amazing happens inside of your psyche. You realize that your safety doesn't come from making perfect choices. Your safety comes from your innate resilience and ability to figure things out. Back when I really struggled with my self-worth and my self-confidence, I was also pretty terrible at making decisions because I didn't have confidence in who I was, in my own self-efficacy, in my ability to handle things. And this was largely affected by my own self-talk and limiting beliefs. But one of the things that I had to work on to get myself to where I am, to build a foundation of true confidence, was my ability to make decisions. Making decisions is a pillar of action, and it's one of the hallmarks of courage. By forcing myself to act, to make a decision, to use courage, I built trust in myself. I learned faster, and I closed those tabs. It was one of the skills that helped shape my beliefs, that got me to move and learn and grow faster. Making decisions helped me improve my confidence, my courage, and my effectiveness. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that I always want to make decisions or that there are not situations where I am happy to delegate a decision or don't really have a strong preference and want to give other people the opportunity to make the decision because they might have a strong preference. There's nothing wrong with letting other people make decisions sometimes, but do it thoughtfully. If you care, be a part of that decision. Don't hide the fact that you don't want to make a decision behind a veil of trying to placate to others. I regularly remind myself when I am given a decision to make that if I am going to open it up to other people, to make sure that I'm taking their values, points of view, and what they want into account, if they don't want to make that decision and they say, I'm good with whatever as well, I'm usually pretty quick to make that decision because I value decisiveness. I value using that muscle. And I'm saving everyone time by making the decision. This is also why I work with people on decisiveness as one of the stepping stones to true confidence. Almost every client that I've worked with who was lacking confidence and self-esteem also was not very decisive. In this case, it's both correlation and causation, or partial causation. And don't get me wrong, I still struggle with this in other ways. I am also a chronic optimizer. I like to try and optimize or over-optimize things, and sometimes I will get too bogged down in the details, and it will become a form of procrastination. I still do struggle with this at times because it shows up in a different way. It's more like I need to continue to improve at recognizing when I'm using the joy of optimization to procrastinate. And I do truly enjoy optimization sometimes. In a video game or a tabletop RPG like Dungeons and Dragons or card game or whatever, I like to optimize. I like to make things as good as they can because it's fun for me. But that doesn't mean that that's a great idea for every area of life, because it's a good way to waste a lot of time. But I'm getting a little off track here. Let's ground what we were just talking about in some science. So why is decisiveness so hard for some of us? Well, for one, modern life is much more complicated in many ways than it was for our ancestors. We actually have way more decisions to make that are much more nuanced and complicated. Many decisions take a lot more cognitive load than they used to. So it's important that we give ourselves some grace around the fact that this is a little harder than it used to be, but that doesn't mean we can't conquer it. Why do our brains naturally default to hesitating, though? To understand this, we have to look at how biology reacts to heavy mental processing. In the field of psychology, we know that executive functioning, the ability to plan, focus, and make choices, is a finite resource. It relies on the prefrontal cortex. And that part of our brain is one of the most energy expensive parts, and it gets exhausted. Let's look at a definitive study that illustrates this beautifully. In 2011, researchers Shai Donziger, Jonathan Lavav, and Leora Avnium-Peso published a landmark paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The researchers wanted to look at how expert rational decision makers perform when subjected to continuous choice making throughout the day. They tracked experienced Israeli parole board judges who spent their days reviewing legal cases to decide whether prisoners should be granted parole. These judges are highly trained to focus solely on the facts, the laws, and the rehabilitation metrics. The study examined over 1,000 judicial rulings over a 10-month period. What they discovered was shocking. The single most influential predictor of whether a prisoner was granted a parole wasn't the severity of the crime, their behavior in prison, or their legal representation, though all of those mattered. It was the time of day the case was heard, specifically in relation to the judge's food breaks. At the start of the day, a judge was highly likely to grant parole, about 65% of the time. But as the hours ticked by, and the judge had to make decision after decision after decision, the rate steadily plummeted, dropping down to near 0% right before their mid-morning break. After the break, where the judges ate and rested, the parole rate instantly shot back up to about 65%. The exact same pattern repeated before and after the lunch break. Why does this happen? Because making a high-stakes decision, like granting parole, demands immense cognitive energy. It requires the brain to calculate risk, project futures, and take responsibility for an active choice. When the brain runs low on energy, it experiences what we call decision fatigue. To conserve energy, the brain defaults to the easiest, lowest risk status quo option. In this case, the status quo was keeping the prisoner locked up. Denying parole required no extra cognitive load. And in other situations, we often make the easy decision of instant gratification. But why does this happen? Think about the implications for your own life. When you allow yourself to stay stuck in a loop of indecision, or when you leave your most critical life choices for the end of the day, when you're already exhausted. You aren't thinking clearly. Your brain is running low on fuel, and it will automatically default to the safest, most passive option, which usually means doing absolutely nothing or sticking with a situation that no longer serves you, or making the decision that you wouldn't want to be making in the first place. Now, at first glance, we would look at this and say, okay, just make less choices. So indecision must be right. Wrong. Indecision is like going through the process of making a decision, but drawing it out for much longer and then not coming to a conclusion and leaving it open as a tab in the background. The faster that we make decisions, the more decisive that we are, the less mental load it's going to take, the less taxing it will be. So by becoming more decisive, we are making each individual decision faster and using much less of our mental load towards it to free up more for decisions in the future. When you spend 20 minutes trying to pick what you have for lunch, you've wasted a ton of cognitive load over something that barely matters. And then you have to make an important decision later and you're already fatigued. But yes, I will say that there is also something to putting yourself in a position to make less total decisions, or not putting yourself in a position to make unnecessary decisions can help as well. And or delegating decisions when you're in a position to do so, but not at the expense of building the muscle of decisiveness. Now, if we want to truly understand why some of us get so utterly paralyzed by choices while others seem to breeze through them with minimal stress, we have to look at a brilliant psychological framework popularized by psychologist Barry Schwartz in his groundbreaking work on choice architecture. Schwartz points out, when it comes to making decisions, human beings generally fall into one of two distinct categories. We are either maximizers or we are satisficers. Now, not everyone is just one or the other. Some people are one in one situation and one in the other. But oftentimes people default much more to one strategy or the other. And understanding which one you default to will completely change how you view your own indecision. Let's look at the maximizers first. If you are a maximizer, your internal operating system is wired to look for the absolute best possible outcome. You don't just want a good phone plan. You want the absolute cheapest plan with the maximum data across all carriers. You don't just want a nice hotel for your vacation. You will spend 12 hours opening 40 different browser tabs, reading every single review on TripAdvisor to ensure you aren't missing a hidden gem. On paper, maximizing sounds like a smart strategy. Who doesn't want the best, right? But unfortunately, psychologically, maximizing is an absolute trap in many situations. Because a maximizer can never truly be sure that they've seen every option, they often suffer from chronic FOMO, or fear of missing out. Even after they finally make a choice, they're plagued by regret. They sit in the hotel room they painstakingly chose, wondering if the hotel down the street had a better view. Maximizing leads to choice paralysis, massive cognitive drag, and ultimately, lower life satisfaction. Now let's contrast that with the second group, the satisficers. The word satisficer is a combination of two words, satisfy and suffice, coined originally by Nobel Prize winning economist Herbert Simon. A satisficer approaches a decision with a clear, predefined set of criteria. They know exactly what good enough looks like. If a satisficer needs a new pair of running shoes, they think, I need shoes that are under 120, have good arch support, and come in blue. They go online or walk into a store. The moment they find a pair of shoes that meets those three criteria, they either buy them or don't spend much time looking at others. This closes the tab and moves on with their day. They don't care if there was a slightly better pair on page 47 of the search results. They've met their criteria. The decision is resolved. Their cognitive energy is preserved. The most staggering part is that on average, maximizers don't make better choices because they burn out too much of their cognitive load on a few choices or inconsequential choices, and then they make worse decisions for the rest of the day. And when they do make a better decision, it's often only marginally better, nowhere near worth the time they spent. They don't care if there was a slightly better pair on page 47 of the search results. They met their criteria. The decision is resolved and their cognitive energy is preserved. This is the maximizer's trap. Maximizers choose based on comparison. Is this better than all the other options? Satisficers choose based on criteria. Does this meet my standard? Here is the ultimate irony discovered in behavioral research. When maximizers occasionally get a slightly better objective outcome, Maybe they save an extra $20 or find a slightly better flight time. Satisficers are almost always subjectively happier with their choices. They experience less regret, less anxiety, and significantly higher peace of mind. If you are struggling with decisiveness right now, there is a very high probability that you're trying to maximize a decision that simply doesn't require it. You are treating a routine choice like a life or death calculation. To become truly decisive, we have to learn the art of intentional satisficing. We have to define our standards before we look at our options and have the courage to stop searching the moment those standards are met. In a previous episode, we talked about 3 tools for taking efficient action. And luckily, those can be very applicable to decisiveness. The first one we talked about was the paradox of choice. Yes, it is of course very relevant here. The paradox of choice states that the more choices that you are given, the less likely you are to make a decision. And subsequently, the more likely you are to be unhappy with the decision that you make. So whenever possible, for mundane, routine decisions, try and keep your choices to 4 or less. Because we often count like 1, 2, 3, 4, lots. At least when it comes to decisions. Now, the more important the decision is, the more likely you are to make a decision, and the more reasonable it is to have more choices. So don't take this as an ultimatum. We also talked about Occam's razor, which is a logical razor that basically states that the simplest choice is often the correct one. Now, there are plenty of times where Occam's razor is not true. But if you're looking for something to help you make a decision quickly, Occam's razor can definitely be a great tool. We also talked about the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, where 20% of things cause 80% of the benefit and 80% only cause 20%. So the more that you can make your decisions in the 20% that gets the 80% of outcomes, the better off you'll be. And last, we talked about Parkinson's law, which is where a task will fill the container you give it. By using time boxing on our decisions and giving ourselves set or preset amounts of time to make a decision, we are cutting off the downside and we are limiting the decision fatigue that we will experience from each individual choice. So remember the 3 tools for efficient action when you're thinking about making decisions. I also want to bring up Tony Robbins here, as he talks quite a bit about making a decision. One of my favorite quotes by him is, "Complexity is the enemy of execution." For mundane, small, everyday tasks, if you want to be decisive, if you want to execute, if you want to take action, keep it simple. Don't make things overly complex that don't need to be. He also talks about big decisions that draw on resolve, commitments, a decision where you are making a choice and you have a resolve behind it. These are very important decisions, and maybe they do require a little more thought and time. But when you make them, when you make the important life-changing decision, the one you know you need to make, and you do it as a commitment, you do it with resolve, it is another form of decisiveness. Because sticking to that commitment, that resolve-based decision, shows that you not only make decisions, but you know how to stick to them. It's the type of decision where you burn your boats, you remove your escape, and you do it no matter what. This is why resolve is such a powerful motivator for action. And the side benefit is you don't have to keep making decisions. The decision is already made. The resolve is there, freeing up the mental load that you need for the decisions that you still have to make. So how do we fix this? How do we really build this muscle of decisiveness, protect our cognitive energy, and ensure that when we make choices, they're not just completely random? Because honestly, you could just randomly make a choice every single time. And honestly, there are times where it's worth doing that. If you have roughly equal options, don't waste a bunch of time. Just make the choice. And oftentimes, you'll get the gut feeling of whether it was the right one or the wrong one. And you might be able to switch it right in the moment if you need to. This is where people flip a coin to make a decision, which can be a way to reduce your decision fatigue. But oftentimes, they find out what they truly wanted if the flip didn't match what they really wanted to do. But there are also very important decisions that shouldn't be made by a coin flip. So how do we also ensure that we make high quality decisions? I think it's important that we talk about good decision making before we talk about how to build the trait of decisiveness. So let's get into how to execute a good decision when you are standing at a major fork in the road. I'm going to give you 2 classic mental models that you can use as cognitive scaffolding for making important decisions. Mental model number 1, the architecture of doors. Popularized by modern organizational strategy, this model asks you to sort every single decision into one of 2 categories: type 1 or type 2. A type 1 door is a one-way door. It is virtually irreversible. Once you walk through it, the door slams shut behind you and ceases to exist. The cost of turning back is often catastrophic. Think of things like selling the rights to your intellectual property, signing a massive multi-year debt contract, or making an explosive public statement, because these choices are irreversible. They deserve deliberateness. They require deep analysis, data collection, and time. But that's only one type. The second type, a type 2 door, however, is also a two-way door. Makes it easier to remember. If you walk through it and you don't like what you find on the other side, you can simply turn around and walk right back out. It might cost you a little bit of time, a small amount of money, or a minor bruise to your ego, but the stakes are fundamentally survivable. Examples include launching a new service offering, changing your morning routine, hiring a contractor for a trial project, or trying a new marketing channel. Here is the strategic mistake most people make. They treat 99% of their life choices like they're type 1 doors, agonizing over them for weeks when in reality, almost everything is a type 2 door. Look at the choice that is paralyzing you right now. Is it a two-way door? If it is, stop overanalyzing. Take a second to think, pick a side, and walk through. And then we have mental model number 2, the 10-10-10 framework. Developed by business journalist Susie Welch, this model is designed to completely bypass emotional overwhelm and the hyper-focus on immediate discomfort. When you are stuck, ask yourself 3 questions about the choices before you. How will I feel about this choice 10 minutes from now? How will I feel about this choice 10 months from now? How will I feel about this choice 10 years from now? Often the choice that is right for your long-term growth is the one that feels incredibly uncomfortable in the first 10 minutes, but great over those longer time frames. This is also a really great way to filter for how important a decision is. If you're not even going to remember it in 10 months, is it really that important? It can feel awkward to set that boundary, terrifying to hit publish, or painful to walk away from a toxic environment. But when you project out to 10 months, that short-term discomfort transforms into pride and relief. And at the 10-year mark, it can be a catalyst that defined your upward trajectory. Think the slight edge or the compound effect. Use this framework to force your brain out of short-term survival mode and into long-term strategic thinking. And also to clarify the truth of how important what you're about to decide is. Now let's get down to the real work. How do you actually become a more decisive person? If you spent a life deferring your choices, How do you re-engineer your mind? This requires an intentional progressive training program. You cannot think your way into decisiveness. You must act your way into it. Here is your 4-part training blueprint. Step 1. Radically reduce lower stakes cognitive load. If you want to have the mental power to make major life choices, you must stop spending so much time and effort on the mundane ones. Either make a decision quickly and efficiently, or automate them entirely. This is why people like Steve Jobs and Barack Obama famously wore the exact same outfit every day. They weren't fashion challenged, debatably. They were aggressively protecting their prefrontal cortex from decision fatigue. Look at your life. Where can you eliminate trivial choices? Meal prep your lunches for the week so you never ask, what should I eat at lunchtime? Lay out your clothes the night before. Build standard operating procedures for your morning workflow. Dictate the small details ahead of time so your brain preserves its premium fuel for the choices that actually move the needle. Step 2. Utilize the 70% information rule. This is a framework utilized by top-tier military organizations and high-velocity executives. People like Warren Buffett, Alex Hormozi, and Jeff Bezos have all said things similar to this rule. Jeff Bezos said that the optimal decision is usually made at about 70% information during an investor call. He went on to basically say that if you wait till 80 or 90%, it takes way too long and you've missed your opportunity, meaning the good decision isn't there anymore. But that not all decisions require you to get to 70%. Alex Hormozi often talks about how many people frankly wait way too long. And so he's gotten this ideology around reducing the time to start as much as possible. Many people wait 8 years to start something, and they could have just started 8 years ago, figured it out, and been way better than where they are now. Or figured out it wasn't for them and already moved on. We waste way too long with these mental tabs open in decisions that we know we should make, hoping that we get to 90, 95, 100%. The 70% information rule states that you should make a decision when you have between 45 and 70% of the total information that you wish you had. If you make a choice with less than 45%, and this is an important choice of the data, you are being reckless. If you wait until you have more than 70% of the data, you're being way too slow. Obviously, there's exceptions to both of these. By the time you get to 90 or 100% certainty, the opportunity is most likely gone, because getting from 70 to 90 takes much longer than getting from 0 to 50. In fact, it often takes longer to get between 70 to 90 than it does between 0 to 70. And if you wait that long, somebody else has often beaten you to the punch. Accept a 30% gap of total uncertainty is the tax of being decisive, of being a good leader, of choosing to grow. Learn to love operating in that gap. Step 3, run micro decisive drills. You need to show your nervous system that quick choices do not lead to death. Start treating low stakes environments like a training ground. When you go out to eat, give yourself exactly 60 seconds to look at the menu. Parkinson's Law. When the minute is up, you must order whatever your eyes are resting on or whatever your gut says right then. Close the menu and do not look back. When you are choosing a movie on a streaming app, set a timer for 2 minutes. If you haven't picked by then, you watch the first option on the trending list, or that's in your saved for later. What you are doing here is exposure therapy. You are training your brain to tolerate the mild anxiety of an imperfect micro choice, proving to your subconscious that you can survive the outcome, and strengthening your decision-making skills. Being decisive is a trait, and just like any other trait or skill, which it's both, you build it like a muscle. And in order to build the muscle, you have to use it. You have to push it. You have to work it out and use it regularly. Otherwise, it will fatigue. Step 4, establish a clear hierarchy of values. This is the ultimate secret to frictionless decision making. One of the major reasons that we agonize over choices is because we don't know what we value most. If you value security and adventure equally, every career choice will seem really tough and tear you apart. You must sit down outside of the heat of the moment and explicitly get clear on what your values are. This is often done in a ranking system because you value multiple things. If autonomy is ranked higher than security, then when an opportunity comes along that is risky but offers massive freedom, the decision is already made for you. If deep relationships is ranked much higher than financial gain, then a promotion that requires you to travel 300 days a year is an instant and easy no. When your value hierarchy is crystal clear, decisions stop being agonizing emotional battles and instead become simple exercises in alignment. Getting clear on your values functions a lot like having resolve. Both reduce the decision fatigue by either making the decisions easy or already made. So as we bring this episode to a close, I want you to take a look at your current life. I want you to identify that one decision that you've been carrying around like a heavy backpack. You've been researching, you've been asking for advice, you've been waiting for a sign. Consider this your sign. Decisiveness gives you power. Make a decision. I want to leave you with a great quote from President Theodore Roosevelt, a man who understood the immense weight of high-stakes choices. He famously remarked, "In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. Let that wash over you." Making a wrong choice and having to pivot is usually way better for your psyche, your growth, and your life than standing completely still. The wrong choice gives you data, experience, and resilience. Nothingness gives you atrophy, regret, and anxiety. You are fully equipped to handle whatever happens on the other side of your choice. You are adaptable. You are resourceful. Stop waiting for the fear to vanish before you step forward. The clarity that you are searching for is not found in contemplation. It is forged in action. Close your tabs. Choose your door. Put the car in drive. And remember, you are enough. And you deserve to fill up your inner cup with happiness, true confidence, and resilience. Thank you for listening to the Sage Solutions podcast. Your time is valuable, and I'm so glad that you choose to learn and grow here with me. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more sage advice. One last thing. The legal language. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. No coaching client relationship is formed. It is not intended as a substitute for the personalized advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional.